What's up, man? We're live.
What's going on? We are live again, back for another one-on-one episode.
Dude, what a great month. Two one-on-one episodes in 1 month. I
Just
can
imagine
tell that
if
you,
everyone recorded a lot of their fun their best one-on-one conversations and released them. What a world we would have.
dude, I would have so much hope in that world. Um, and yeah, I'm excited for this episode because in a way it feels a little bit meta. Um, we talk all the time that if these two things or three things are true, like we can keep doing this for a long time, right? And those things, and doing this is recording this podcast, and those things are we're having fun, which hopefully people can tell by our level of excitement. Two is like we're learning, right? Like we're getting exposed to new information. We're changing the way we think. We're breaking our own frames. And third is like hopefully we're also adding value to people who listen every week. And I think seeing the numbers of audience grow, that's nice, but I don't know if it's like enough of a driver for us to keep doing that, week over week.
Definitely not. Yeah, the
Yeah,
energy has the fun and the learning has to be there.
yeah. Like I need to look forward. Like I look forward to these recording like slots like every week with a lot of excitement, and I feel like I want to keep feeling that way. But yeah, I think maybe to make that like second bucket of like learning more concrete, we wanted to do this episode. It was actually like a really there's a couple of episodes that we do that just really change and transforms the way we operate as solopreneurs or as people. And one of those episodes that I think kind of broke both of our frames was I think episode number 36 that we did with Tal, where he basically was sharing how he's using AI, how's he creating like really cool co-pilots for PMs. And that episode inspired us both in a lot of ways, but it definitely inspired you a lot, and to the point that you took massive action on it. And now it kind of basically led you to build this, amazing Copilot. I've heard from multiple people that it's like, hey, there's nothing like it in the market, especially for preparing for meta style product sense interviews and analytical interviews. So yeah, maybe let's start there. Like you remember basically like talking to Tal in the episode, and then after that having like that moment like, oh shit, like I think there might be something here for me.
Yeah, yeah, totally. Um, and I've been looking forward to talking about this too, because even though we've kind of mentioned the Copilot in passing, and I have this kind of allergy to like being overly self-promotional. As I started talking to you about it offline and describing to you some of like the building blocks of how like that whole Copilot machine works, you expressed interest in just like learning more about it. So I think that's kind of why we're, and I thought if it's helpful to Mark, maybe it'll be helpful to other people. So yeah, going back to we recorded with Tal, I want to say end of last year, probably like November, December timeframe. It was episode 36, I believe. And by it's so funny how the context of what else is going on in your life when you come into these conversations, it's almost like inevitably the conversation, you view the conversation and the content of the conversation through the lens of everything else that's kind of like on your mind. And when I when we sat down to record that podcast, I was coming off of running my second cohort of my Maven course, which is focused on product sense and analytical thinking interviews. It was taking a lot of time to run it, and still does. But I um, I I had this moment where I was like, I really need to start thinking about how to increase the value of this course, because I do want to be able to better monetize it and charge a higher price. And so I was just thinking a lot about levers, like what are the levers that I could play with to increase the price of my course, and to just like deliver more value to people. And um, so anyways, I came into that conversation with that was kind of like in the back of my mind as we started talking to Tal about his experience and what he's been working on with his course. I think he just came off of like his Lenny podcast and Lenny post, first Lenny post. And we started talking about Claude, and we started talking about using Claude for context. And at that point I hadn't played with Claude. I'd been a Claude laggard, I guess, within our small world. I'm sure there's still a bunch of people that haven't used Claude, but my understanding of what I could do with AI was at that point still pretty limited to what you could do with Chat GPT and just like a chat, right? And so when we talked about Claude and specifically Claude projects, that was a moment for me where I left that episode. I don't think we talked about my Copilot. I don't remember talking about my Copilot live on air, but maybe in our debrief, I brought up how I wanted to tinker with it. But that episode got me juiced up that I think I spent, I mean, I think it might have been that day or the next day that I signed up for Claude, started playing with Claude projects, just seeing like how the thing worked, right? Like how does this product even function? Um,
And I think at the time, like correct me if I'm wrong, there were, OpenAI had custom GPTs, but they didn't have the concept of projects yet. Like project was like a very much an Anthropic only
correct.
feature.
Correct. And I had not built, I hadn't tinkered with custom GPTs. So I didn't really know the limitations of custom GPTs. I just kind of knew it was a thing people were putting out there. And it's a way to like take some of the context that you have and distribute it to people in a conversational AI format. But I had never connected the dots between anything I was doing in my course and custom GPTs. But for some reason, the idea of being able to take files and instructions so that you could kind of just start a new chat without having to do any special prompting, just jumping right into something, but all that context is already shaping the direction of the conversation. That was my light bulb moment in the conversation with Tal. I was like, wow, that exists. Okay, so I don't remember exactly why my brain went to where it went because it's kind of murky in hindsight. But the first place my brain went was, I wonder if I could use this to get it to tackle questions. Okay, so like basically kind of, and the reason I was thinking about that is because in my first two cohorts of my course, I would argue that the two most common kind of like buckets of things people wanted more time with me for or wanted to ask me about were bucket one was, hey, I saw this question come up in the question bank. I'm trying to figure out how to apply your frameworks to that question. I know we worked through some other questions, but like, do you have any advice on how to tailor the framework to this question? I was like, okay. So I was doing a lot of that, kind of like talking to people. And because I didn't have my own Copilot, I basically had to use a lot of brains like cycles in my head to kind of apply all my frameworks to a brand new question, but do it in an efficient way that it didn't take me like 35 minutes to like answer each of these questions. But I was trying to kind of like do that a lot. And then the second thing is my templates, I had just launched, I think maybe like the first or second version of my templates, and my students were starting to use the templates to work through questions on their own. And then they would want my feedback on how they're like, what do you think about this content? How's the segmentation here? How are these problems? What do you think about these solutions? For analytical thinking, it might be like, hey, like, what do you think about these ecosystem health metrics or the North Star metric or how I navigated this trade-off, like those kind of things. And so I was spending a lot of time answering that. So the first thing I did was try to figure out, can I take everything I've been talking about publicly, everything I've been talking about in my course, and just like feed it into these projects and just give it a product sense question or an analytical thinking question and just see like how does it handle, like can it actually internalize it, right? And
And when you say like
yeah.
handling like all your lectures and stuff like that, are you basically just saying like, hey, like taking all the transcripts of all different like classes that I've done, all the different lighting lessons, like is that basically it, or is there
Yeah, the
more
first
to it?
thing, because I had only run two cohorts at the time, and I think I only had three. I think back then, I think it was only three live sessions per cohort. And when you run a Maven course, all of your sessions are recorded in Zoom, so students who can't join live can watch them later. So I could easily just like download the transcripts of those sessions. And I think the first version I did, I had yet to bifurcate the product sense Copilot and the analytical. I just tried to make one that does both. I just took all the transcripts and I dropped them right in there. And then I think I went into the instructions, and I knew none of them would tell Claude what I wanted Claude to do. So what I went into the instructions and I said something like, take all these transcripts and treat them as the knowledge for how to handle product sense and analytical thinking interviews. Each new chat in this session is going to be basically a simulated interview where you're playing the candidate and the human is playing the interviewer. And I want you to internalize all the frameworks and basically check in with the human as if it's a real interview, come up with the content in a way that honors all the guardrails and the files. And it didn't like quite work but I kind of started to develop an intuition for how to make it better. And I think the first big intuition was I need to split out analytical thinking and product sense, because there are actually different things that are supposed to get covered in these, and it's like two different conversations. So you can't blame AI for why it doesn't do a good job with either if it's trying to do both in one. So I
Yeah.
kind of unbundled them and took the transcripts just for the product sense lectures, and then the transcripts just for the analytical thinking lectures, and I created the first version of the custom instructions for both. And
So it's
that's when it
basically like two
started.
two projects basically per
Yeah, two
like
projects.
total, one for each.
Totally. Two projects, one for each. And that's when it started to go from like, this definitely doesn't work, to like, okay, there's definitely a path for this to work. Like, this is like, it started to feel almost like immediately incremental improvements pay off. And the specific way that I did the incremental improvements was, I mean, there's really only two levers: the files and the instructions. Obviously, the third lever is out of my control, which is which model is running. But my assumption was, as the models get better and better, which I should just assume, and we should continue assuming, then theoretically, as long as the context is the right context and the instructions are the right instructions, then the output in the chat sessions should just get like better and better and better, right? And I think at that time it was Sonnet 3, maybe 3.5, but it was maybe even 2.7. I don't know. I forget the versions at this point. But yeah, it started. So I would ask a question, and like it was almost like you're immediately. So we talked. I told you that when we talk about this, like I've had some thoughts about evals, because if you gave someone else who is not, I don't say not me, because that makes me sound special, but not like a calibrated interviewer for the kinds of interviews that the Copilot's meant to help with. And like Mark, you were never like a calibrated interviewer at Meta. So even though you're like super, super smart, if I put you at the starting point of like, hey, here's this Copilot, here's the output, how would you improve it? You wouldn't have the domain knowledge to know what exactly is off, right?
Totally.
But because
And I
I
think
had all that
that's
knowledge, I started tinkering with the instructions. So basically, I'd generate a response, and from the very first response, I would be like, okay, looks like it doesn't know that when I ask a question, the first thing it should basically check in with me about like the assumptions it wants to make, and then the game plan for the interview, and it shouldn't get into any of the content before it does those things. So then I would like go into the instructions, and I would hard code, be like, when starting the interview, the first thing you should do is this. Never do this until you've done these things. And then I would go back in the chat, and I would hit the, I think it's called the retry button in the chat. And I would say retry with no changes. And retry with no changes would regenerate the response, but it would do a fresh call to like the latest instructions. So that allowed me to basically tinker my way until I was ready to go to the next step and the next step and the next step, until it got to the point. I mean, this is definitely like it took many, many hours to do it across both Copilots, but that was the fundamental process of kind of like iterating to the point where it passed my, human vibe evals.
Yeah. And I think that's probably like, to me, like one of the most valuable things of a copilot like that, right? Of like, I think that's where these type of projects can get dangerous if they're not like, if there's no proper evals, because especially for something like interviews, right? Where there's some like objective rubric, but like, it's really hard. Like, the LLM can come up with an answer that sounds really good. And unless you really know like what they're looking for, it's really hard to actually know, like, even though this is good, this is not the signal that the interviewers are looking for. So I think like having that baked in, those evals are extremely important. And I think that's like an edge of like, you can only do this if you are calibrated and know how these places interview people. And I'm curious, like at what point were you like what gave you the confidence of like, hey, like this is good enough, this is adding value, like do you remember like when you got to that moment?
Yeah, so I remember I started with, so initially this was not something I even thought about charging for. It was purely a way, because I saw Tal inspired me. Tal had this like prompt playbook that he was selling, and he bundled the playbook in with his Maven course, and that allowed him to tell a story about why the course is valuable, because it includes this thing that costs like X amount of dollars if you just buy it on its own. So my thought process was, if I can create something that is valuable enough for people to want to buy it on their own and then bundle it into the course, that would theoretically allow me to increase the price of the course. So I started by just focusing on the value. And the value initially was I mainly had the first 2 or 3 people that played with the Copilot be actually ex-Meta interviewers. So PMs that I knew from Meta. And I asked them if they would be willing to do me a favor and just like drop a question into the Copilot. Because I at this time, it was just like a single Google Doc that I could just like share with someone and be like, just follow these instructions. Now it's like that, but it just has a little bit more nuance to it. And one of the first responses I got was like, this is crazy. Like, this is really good. And that was probably 3-4 weeks after I started tinkering, I want to say. So I think my first version that I started kind of like tinkering with myself was probably a weekend. And then it took me a couple more weeks to kind of feel like, okay, now I can give this to other people. And that must have been January of last year. And then I think I had my first cohort of January of this year, I mean. So January, my cohort came around and I decided to increase the price of the course. I think initially it was like from $500 to like $600. I was like, I could charge another $100 for like having this Copilot. Yeah. And then, so I basically got a couple of people telling me, this is really impressive. It's good. Like, I would almost like, this is almost like a hire for me. Like, the way that it handled these answers is like, if it's delivered well and time management is done well and it's communicated well, the content itself is like close enough to a hire. And then I was like, cool, like what would make it a strong hire, right? So I get that feedback and then incorporate it. And then I put it in the hands of my first set of students in January of this year. But I also emailed everyone that took my course in July and October of last year. And I was like, hey, just so you know, I built this resource. Because you took the course already, it's yours for free. I'm just looking for feedback. Awesome. So I kind of started building this like early adopter group of people that already knew my frameworks, already knew the course, and I just gave them a freebie to try it. Most people didn't care, but as always with like a new product, but I did get like probably 3 or 4 people that were like started power using it, and they're like, oh, this part isn't good, or this part isn't good. And then it wasn't probably until like February of this year, if I'm not mistaken, February or March, when I started to feel like, okay, this is definitely like, I'm starting to hear the first stories of people being like, this completely changed how I practice. I started finding myself using it to answer students' questions. Like, students would be like, hey, like, how would you tackle this question? I'm like, you're putting me on the spot right now. Let's just see what the Copilot would come up with, because it's literally like how I would think about answering it. And then I'll just like tell you if I think it's off on something, or I'll just ask a probing question from the Copilot if I think if it's not giving me enough depth. And I've just been continuously iterating on it since. So I'd say I launched the PayHip page where I distributed it with a price tag for the first time in March or April, with a $299 price point. And that was just in time for my first Lenny post. So I'm sorry, technically my second Lenny post, my April Lenny post about product sense interviews. And that ended up driving, I guess I won't say the amount, the dollars, but like a surprising amount of sales. Okay.
Yeah.
And at that point I was like, okay.
And it all came through the Lenny post thing, or?
The Lenny, yeah, because the Lenny post linked to both my course and a lightning lesson that I had coming up, but also it included a link to my templates and to my Copilot. And the way I've built my templates is, I mean, they're free templates that I give away, and a lot of people some people email me that they pass their meta interviews, largely thanks to my materials, without ever having paid me $1, because I've put out these live lectures, my free templates, my Lenny posts. I have a YouTube channel with a bunch of free content. So, but one of the things I do is, if someone is using my free template and they end up wanting like help, either working through a question in the template or getting feedback on their filled out template, that I have a link at the top of the template to my Copilot that people can go and check it out. And that drove sales. And then, yeah,
like another thing that was really smart, and I might be, correct me if I'm misremembering the order of operations here, and I think Tal did this too, that I believe that if someone bought your Copilot too, they kind of could use that to like deduce it to the price of your course, basically. So
Correct.
it's like almost like you already kind of were like almost getting a taste of like your knowledge and your ability to understand the meta interviews in a lower price point that also is self-serve. And if they like that, then be okay, cool. Like now I can augment it and sign up for this course, which I thought was really smart too.
Totally, yeah. And that's still true today. If someone buys my Copilot today and they end up wanting to take my course, I'll send them a discount link on the course and the exact amount of the Copilot. So, um, so yeah, that got us to a point where so PayHip initially handled the delivery of the materials, which was like a Google Doc that included instructions for how to set up the product sense and analytical thinking projects. And by the way, I'm happy to kind of like show you quickly kind of like some of this stuff if you're interested in it.
Yeah, I think that'd be interesting. I think, I mean, we've added some context, right? But like for someone who was listening, be like, wait, like this guy is just literally just selling me like a Google Doc, that I need to copy and paste into my project, um, like, and that's actually gonna allow me to have better conversations with AI. Like that's a crazy concept, almost, right? It's like you're selling basically like context and expertise into your brain that's captured in a Google Doc. And not only that, but you also like so you're basically like selling like different levels of expertise or buckets. One is like your expertise of how meta style interviews work, then your ability to like kind of assess, not only just like all the context of how they work, but also like the ability to assess good and bad answers, right? And like those evals. But then you're also like selling the expertise of taking this knowledge, this context, and being able to structure it in a way that is helpful to then have the AI play a key role in helping you practice, which is also like a non-trivial skill set, right? And that's kind of abstract, but I kind of feel like the more we talk about it, like it kind of feels inevitable that people who are like world-class experts in something do more of it, but I think they probably don't know how to do it, which I think is like a really cool skill set that you figured out pretty early on in the game.
Yeah, well, thank you. I think that I was like so deep already in like this becoming a priority for me, like this course and this content. And so like when I stumbled upon the technology, it's kind of, I immediately asked myself how it applies. And for reasons that are honestly hard for me to articulate, this is just where my head went, right? Now, I agree with you. I think that I don't think I've seen people do exactly what I'm doing with this with their content yet. I mean, you do see custom GPTs, right? So there are people that are taking their knowledge and putting it in a custom GPT with instructions and files and giving people access to it. My Copilot now does include like an unlisted custom GPT that people can access as well if they want that. I just think it's inferior to what they would get in like the let's call it the platinum version of what of how to use my Copilot, which is I think it's still today in written form at least. It's still Claude, especially Claude 4. Sonnet 4.5 is I think the best one I've seen yet. I didn't really see any improvement honestly with Sonnet 4 relative to 3.7. I thought 3.7 actually handled potentially even better than 4. But 4.5 has all of the adherence that 3.7 had with all of like the content quality stuff that I didn't even see in 4. And I still, but if someone wants to practice with voice mode, ChatGPT is still like ChatGPT voice mode is still the best way to handle it. But yeah, to maybe like bring this to life a little bit, I think
Yeah, let's do that.
an example. So this is kind of like, let me pull it up. Do you see my Copilot page?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know if you feel comfortable like sharing maybe like one of the like screen sharing quickly one of the files, just so like people see like what like it's literally like a doc,
Totally.
right? Like
yeah, but I think to contextualize that, it's better. It's almost like let's start with the end and work backwards, right?
cool.
So I think, and in the spirit of a recent talk I gave in Supra, this is a vibe coded Copilot website that I launched to replace. So this used to be my. Oh wait, you're only seeing.
Yeah, we're only seeing the.
Let me share
website.
Let me share my whole Chrome. There we go. Okay. So I think now you see the PayHip page. Okay.
Yeah.
So when I first launched, and for the first like 6-ish months of the Copilot, I would send everyone to PayHip, and it's
And by the way,
basically like
PayHip. What is PayHip? Is basically like it's yeah.
it's the first of these exact types of products I've used, but I hear it's a competitor or similar to Gumroad, so just like a
Okay.
way to sell like digital goods. It's not like Shopify where you're selling like a thing, like a physical product, but it's
Yeah.
it's like Shopify for digital goods almost, but very, very simple. And so I created a page, um, put some like, oh, put some content in like the carousel, some screenshots. I think the first version just had like one photo, and it's like there's a title, and then there's just like literally a description of what it is, and then you could just like click buy now and pay. And then PayHip would take a cut. And then once someone submitted all their information, they'd get an email that has like whichever file I wanted to give them. So it was like a PDF initially. Okay. Um,
By the way, how
yeah.
and was the cut the main motivator for you to move away from PayHip, or what was the real reason?
It wasn't the main motivator. I think the main motivator for me was I felt like I was just like really limited in what I could do with this page. Like I felt like I wanted to take more control of like the positioning and the messaging of what it is than just like this. And then the second piece was I was starting to look into like, hey, like if this theoretically, I don't have a lot of marginal costs. Like if I could potentially run ads maybe one day to this page, I would want to make sure I can have proper attribution and like, have all the algorithms optimized for the right events. And then I started looking into like PayHip's kind of like analytics integrations, and I just wasn't very satisfied with how they worked. So I just, for all the reasons, I want to vibe code my own anything. Like I was like, I should just build this. Like this
Yeah.
doesn't feel like it's that complicated. Um,
And I think like in parallel too, you started like going pretty deep into Cursor and kind of realizing, oh
this
wait,
is
like this is
precursor. Yeah.
precursor. Okay.
Like, well, at least like me wanting to build my own site was pre-playing with Cursor. But
Okay.
then when I started playing with Cursor, that was again, like when you stumble in a new technology and there's an existing problem you're trying to solve, it's kind of like light bulb moment.
Yeah.
And what I ended up with is this site. So it's like I put it under so it's benerez.com/copilot. And I've just been like iterating on this over time to just make sure I present it in the way that I want to present this product, right? Like just any other product, it's product marketing, and I want to.
Yeah.
Why would I not do my best job, right? Like presenting this thing that I am putting my name behind. So
Yeah. I mean,
the
it's so
thing,
much better.
I mean, I like it better, and it's like everything's. And then the buy now integration with Stripe takes someone to this page so they can just like pay here. And then when that Stripe, transaction goes through, I have a Zapier integration that takes that email that gets submitted, puts it into a Google Sheet. And then I ended up realizing that, and by the way, I ended up deciding to use a Google group to control access to the document. So instead of sending someone just like um, a PDF with all the instructions, which kind of locked in all the instructions at a moment in time, given that I was iterating a lot, I wanted to give people access to a dynamically updating resource of some kind. So that was why I decided to use Google Docs. But then I didn't want the Google Doc links to be easily, piratable and shared on the internet. So I ended up creating a Google group that if someone bought the Copilot, I would add them to a Google group, which then controlled access to the materials. And then this Zapier integration I had added that buyer email to a sheet. And then I had a separate Google app script run and take that email address and programmatically add it to the Google group that controls access to the documents. And then once that was confirmed, I had another Google app script email the person a link to, actually it emailed them a PDF that stays pretty static that includes the links to the updating materials. So that's kind of like the and in that process, I learned you cannot programmatically add people to a Google group unless you have a Google Workspace account. So for a long time, I was kind of like punting on that. And then when I was in Europe, this was kind of like my big passion project while I was in Europe in August, is I ended up first week of August, vibe coded the website, set up the Stripe payment link, and fully like just ripped the Band-Aid and moved all of my traffic from going to PayHip to going to my new site
Nice.
and the Stripe link.
And
Yeah.
your level of involvement, like with PayHip and now with kind of your custom web page, is it the same basically? Like it's like fully automatic? Because with actually, like, let me start there. With PayHip, was it fully automatic? Someone would buy the Copilot and then they would just like get an email right away with
I had to
the
make
access?
I had to make a trade-off that I was fine with getting it off the ground with the PayHip setup that was not something that I had solved until August. And the trade because I was just biting. It was less of a limitation of the PayHip system, and it was more of a limitation of the Google Workspace. So I was doing everything from my personal Gmail up until August. And then I just ran into this limitation where I could not programmatically add someone to a Google group unless I got the Workspace account. So I paid whatever, $15 a month, and I got the Workspace account for benerez.com. And then that's when I realized I could programmatically add someone to the Google group. And at that point, I started by doing that with the PayHip page first. So when someone bought from PayHip, I had Zapier scrape the emails I was getting from PayHip and automatically adding those emails to the Google Sheet, and then everything else worked the same it works today. So the only change I made to that process when I moved from PayHip to Stripe with my own site was just adding another Zapier integration that actually integrated directly with Stripe. So when someone made a purchase in Stripe, now that's the thing that triggered the Zapier workflow instead of the PayHip purchase. But the rest of the system I had built prior to that.
Yeah. So to summarize, kind of like the evolution was like PayHip with your Gmail, and that was kind of like this static like PDF that wasn't ideal.
And in that process, if you let's say someone in California purchased the Copilot at 11 p.m. their time, when it was 2 a.m. my time in New York,
which you're sleeping in
I'm
normal
sleeping.
Night.
and what was happening is I initially I did have a Google group requirement. So what would happen is there was this period where someone bought it, but they could not yet access the materials until I woke up.
Yeah.
Okay. And then when I woke up, I look at my phone. I'm like, I sold a Copilot. I have to now I have a task. I have to go add them to this group. And then at some point I was like, screw it. I'm selling enough of these that workflow is just slowing me down. I don't want to be a bottleneck. I want people to get the content when they buy it. So I basically just made it so that there was no Google group limitation on the materials. So I just accepted the vulnerability risk. And then when I discovered that I could use this Zapier workflow plus the workspace, I brought back the Google group limitation. So only people in the Google group could do it because I had figured out a way to programmatically add people to the Google group.
Makes sense. So it was PayHip, Gmail. Ben still had to be on top of his shit. Otherwise people wouldn't get their Copilots. Then PayHip with, workspace with professional email. And then now it's full custom setup with your own website directly with Stripe.
Payment link, Google Workspace account, Google Apps Script. So yeah, right now someone can buy the Copilot while we're recording this podcast, and they'll get the Copilot materials delivered to them within a minute or something.
Yeah. And what's been really cool about this is that we've benefited for this with Insider Loops too, because we've learned from all this experience. And we actually still haven't earned the right to automate a lot of these things. Exactly. That's in the backlog. We'll get it when
we know how to do it when we're ready.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, totally. So kind of
I'm curious.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. No, I'm curious where you're going to go.
So I just added this yesterday. And it's, so one of the things that I mentioned is that when people ask me, hey, how can I work through this question? What I do is I like to go to the Copilot and see what it comes up with. And then I prompt it to the point where I can actually create a share link to that session with the Copilot. And then I send it to the person asking me the question. I'm like, hey, take a look. Does this make sense? Do you have any specific follow-ups or things that the Copilot did that don't make sense? Because I generally kind of approve of this direction, right?
Yeah.
And so as I kind of think about why people buy my Copilot, it's they probably end up trusting me for some reason. Something that I've done has indicated that this will be trustworthy, this will be valuable. And so anything I can do to continue to enhance trust and give people value for free is something that I'm interested in. So I just added these two cards, and for those just listening, it's basically I have a section on my website for the Copilot just called seeing the Copilot in action. And I added a card for a product sense demo and one for an analytical thinking demo. And what they do is they just take you to public share links of Claude chat sessions.
Oh,
So in
that's
this
smart.
case, you could literally just see, I mean, you're not getting access to like the underlying files and instructions. You're just getting to see the output, right? So the idea is if you want more of this, you buy the Copilot to get this. And so it starts by, walking through the assumptions, and then it talks about the product motivation, sets a mission statement, breaks down the
Hey,
ecosystem. Yeah.
can I ask a question here?
Yeah.
That I've been meaning to ask, and I cannot believe I haven't asked this before. Why did you decide to set up the roles in this Copilot the way you have, right? Like, because basically right now the way it is the user using the Copilot is like quote unquote the person giving the interview, and then the Copilot is like the interviewee, which it's kind of counterintuitive, right? Like if you want to use it for practicing, why wouldn't you just simulate it the other way? So yeah, can you walk me through why you made it that way?
It's funny. That's like the first question Tal asked me, and it's the first question Peter Yang asked me when I went on his podcast. And I've actually evolved my answer to this because the more I realize it's not obvious to people, the more I have to kind of like really get straight in my own head on why that's how I started. I think now what I would say is I have a framework that I didn't really have articulated for this at the time that I did this, but the framework I have now is like I believe it's important to get ready for interviews, for these exact type of interviews at least, in 3 phases. And I think the first phase is getting comfortable with the content. Okay. So if you didn't have to worry about how you deliver the content verbally, you didn't have to worry about time management with unlimited time, and like you just take your time, take a whole week if you want to work through this question. Can you get through the content in a way that is like passing content? Okay. Like, does your brain understand how to come up with this stuff? Right. And then only once you're comfortable with the content as a foundation, then do I tell people I think it's smart to start investing time in getting practice delivering the content, and then once they can get comfortable delivering the content, let's say maybe it takes someone an hour and a half to get through it verbally with someone, then now you start tightening up time management so you can get it down, little by little to 35 minutes, which is what you want to be able to do in these interviews. And the mistake, and the reason I've recently formalized this in my head at least, and I think it's a really good kind of like framework, is because I would see people schedule admittedly not cheap one-on-one mocks with me who didn't take my course, because I do get people reaching out from like LinkedIn or whatever that want to do mocks, and I would take the call. Like I would be like, sure, I'll do a product sense mock with you or an analytical thinking mock with you, and I would show up, and they would just it was clear that they were trying to simultaneously do the very foundational work on the content, the delivery, and the time management all in one. And they would just bomb the mock, right? And I would have to stop the mock and be like, hold on, like, can you tell me like what kind of prep have you done before this mock? And I realized people were not spending enough time doing the preparation on the content before they even got into the delivery. And I felt bad taking their money. So I'm like, hey, I have a bunch of like free resources online. Why don't you go familiarize yourself with this stuff? And when you're comfortable with the content, come back and we'll basically do a mock, and I'm not going to charge you again for it or whatever. But like, I felt people were just they were just skipping the step of like practicing the content. So to tie, that to your question,
that's actually
that's probably why I started with the AI playing the role of the candidate, because I think subconsciously I was kind of trying to use this to create an AI powered workflow for doing what I was doing back in 2020 when I was practicing for my meta interviews, which was to literally watch people on YouTube and the recorded mocks, like how did they approach this question, and then try to like almost reverse engineer the pattern matching in my head to come up with my own way of approaching the questions.
Yeah. No, that's actually a really helpful way to think about it. And just like make sure that I got it. So there's like basically like 3 steps or phases, right? The first step is like the content, right? Make sure that actually like what a great answer looks like. And the second one is like the delivery, like make sure you're like actually sharing that information in a way that's helpful. And then the third one is like timing, right? Of like kind of like crushing make sure that you're being concise, that you're like managing like the entire maybe 45 minutes that you have to make sure you get to cover all the steps and that you're like investing and allocating time accordingly for each of the kind of maybe questions or follow-ups. Yeah, that's super interesting. And it actually like resonates. I think like one of like, one of the first like Uber guides that we sold, someone was like, hey, like it would be really cool if like I could see what like a great like jam looks like in practice, which is I think kind of getting to what you're getting at here.
Exactly.
And
People love like some of the content that I put out there that people find most valuable is like recordings. Like people that take my course get recordings of me answering the questions that we work through in the case. And like we take 2 hours to work through a question for product sense and
Wow.
2 hours to work through analytical thinking. I'm guiding the discussion. I'm seeding a lot of the content, but I'm really like thinking out loud with them about why I'm making each of those decisions. And then I send them a link to a recording of me actually performing as a candidate in a simulated mock with Brian Kemmler, who's a friend of mine who helps. He joins as a guest in the course. But I send them a link to like, hey, here's how I took that thing that we just took 2 hours to do, and I deliver it in a 35-minute, well, technically 45 minutes, including start to finish stuff, mock interview. And the ability to see like how to come up with it in that long form and then how to actually deliver it with time management is what gets people to start, their brain starts working on everything that they do to fit within those constraints, because they actually have like an example of good that they can start mapping to, like a baseline.
Yeah. Because the reason why I asked that question, I was like, and again, I think this probably speaks of like, how long has it been since I've done an interview or I've prepped for an interview? But I was like, actually what I would love to do with this is actually like thinking about voice mode, right? With OpenAI, like, which is it's getting pretty good. And almost like I would love to like be interviewed, like almost like a live mock, right? And then I get feedback. Because I think, right, like let's say like now I know the content, right? And I know what great looks like. And let's say like another way that I could think about using this is like, I ask the question, right? And then I answer it, and then I prompt this project, right? And then it gives me the answer, right? And the answer is probably going to look different than my answer, but that doesn't mean that's the wrong answer, because there's so many ways of answering that same question, right? So I think that was where my head was going, but I think that makes perfect sense. And it's almost like I think I was trying to run before learning how to walk.
Yeah, no, and I actually think that's where this is all heading. So don't get me wrong. I think that there will be a point in the not that distant future where either my Copilot or someone else who's maybe ahead of me in some sense comes up with a Copilot with a simulation in which AI plays the role of the interviewer in a way that is high fidelity and accurate enough that I would recommend it. So far, I've had, it's probably like half a dozen people reach out to me being like, hey, I took your Lenny post, or I took some of your online materials, and I built this AI interviewer that you could like refer your students and clients to like get practice with the materials. I'm like, cool, send it my way, I'll take a look. None of them are good enough, and the reason that none of them are good enough is because it's actually one of the properties of where we are with AI today. So okay, where we are with AI is trying to be as helpful as possible. It's trying to follow the instructions that you give it. Okay. You know who follows instructions in an interview? The candidate. You know who doesn't actually follow instructions very well? An interviewer. Right? Interviewers go off script. They go off-roading. They follow their intuition. They have to do whatever they have to do to get the signal. And what they're certainly not doing is giving you the benefit of the doubt as a candidate. Okay, so AI is not good at doing that, AI, today at least. And I have not taken the time to write the instructions and to tinker in eval to the point where I've been able to get the AI. I mean, I've played with it for sure, but it's not good enough. Like it doesn't know how to simultaneously get the signal it needs while asking the right probing questions that demonstrate that it's actually critical of the candidate.
Yeah.
Like it's
It's
just
almost
not
like
good.
you would. Yeah, totally. Sorry.
No, that. So for those reasons, I think that's why. That said, I do think AI is good at evaluating submissions. Like the second main use case of my Copilot is like you could work through the template and submit a PDF of the template to the Copilot and be like, "Could you score this?" And it's actually very good at like understanding the content of what has been given it to it, and then holding it side by side with like a set of evaluation standards, and then scoring it and telling you kind of where you fell short and giving you some ways to improve it. But the real time process, maybe the latest advanced voice mode in ChatGPT is better than when I played with it last time. So maybe I'm what I'm saying is stale, but at least as of like a few weeks ago, when I launched ChatGPT support for the Copilot, it still wasn't something I actually removed interviewer mode from my Copilot materials altogether because people were coming in. I was kind of like, I had a beta label on it, and people are like, "Oh, a beta, it must be good. It's just not like prime time." And I realized it's not even good enough to have a beta label on it, so I just removed it, and I'm just doubling down on the two use cases that I know for sure it's super good at.
Yeah, so, super interesting. Yeah, it
So
almost feels like
yeah,
you need to be able to edit the root of the AI to be able to be helpful there, and like the project instructions are not good enough to get there. It's almost like you need like a system prompt for the system prompt of like how to act, which I think it's right now, none of these foundational models are giving you the ability to do.
it's that, but it's also the context that you feed into the system is harder to standardize. And what I mean by that is, like all the interviewers, let's say you were to be a fly on the wall in 100 interviews at Meta, okay, for PMs. There would be clear patterns in how the successful candidates approach their responses. Okay, and you could codify those, and that would be useful for a candidate to know, because if I could follow those patterns, I'll succeed. If you were to look at the behavior of the 100 interviewers in those interviews, my intuition, being friends with, I don't know, dozens of calibrated interviewers at Meta, and having talked to them about how they approach these interviews, is that you would see at least 4 to 5 buckets of patterns of how interviewers approach these interviews. Some are very aggressive and keep interrupting. Some like to be quiet and ask very small numbers of questions. Some like to assertively drive the interview. Some like to passively let the candidate drive the interview, right? Some like to ask, some know exactly what the trade-off question might be in an analytical thinking interview ahead of time. Some might come up with a trade-off question in an analytical thinking interview on the spot, right? So I think there would need to be a more kind of like rigorous codification of interviewer etiquette and interviewer kind of like approaches in order to properly solve like the real simulation of the interviewer in one of these AI settings.
Yeah.
And I don't see
Or
anyone putting in the legwork to get all that data. It's mostly proprietary, like behind a paywall. Not behind a paywall. It's like, I don't even know if Meta could do that, if Meta wanted to do it, unless they start recording
totally.
all the interviews.
Yeah. Which I guess is kind of like similar. You run into a similar challenge when you do mock interviews. But yeah, it's like, but at least someone, hey, who's like calibrated and who you can trust. But yeah, I almost wonder if like the future is like you can almost like factor in like those different personas of like the jerk interviewer, they're like overly nice, they're like in the middle, they're like freestyler, right? And like almost like every time you do a mock, you like kind of like randomly choose one of them, and you get to do that.
That's probably the way, actually. That like if I was to like make this my focus for the next month or a few weeks, it would probably end up having to be something like that, where you create these different like personas. Yeah. And then you ask the AI to be each persona. But
which
yeah,
which is making me think we should have Varun Puri back, because I feel like he will have a lot of insight here. And for those like not familiar, he's a friend of the pod. He's the co-founder and CEO of Udly Roleplays, and basically what they do is like they have a platform where they teach. Basically, like sales team use this platform to basically like role play like sales conversations, and they have like each company has like eval basically on how they assess what a good sales call is. They also, of course, have like all those like curveballs of like, someone asking a difficult question or being like, this price is fucking insane. Like, what are you saying? Like, and like it helps train like their EAs and SDRs so like the first time they do a demo or a call, they're just ready to go and they have like way more reps. As opposed, and also they have reps that are low risk as opposed to like, like having to talk to real customer and mess that call up. So that could be interesting to see how he's solving that problem, because I think it's very, very tangential.
Totally. And I'd be curious what the training data is and what the, like, how much of that is, because, what we're doing here is basically RAG, right? Like, it's not, like, I didn't actually train any models. There's no pre-training that I've done that's special. It's just RAG. So whatever they do, I'd be curious kind of like how the system works underneath the hood and what would go into it. But just to kind of finish this for a second, I want you to see both pieces. I want you to see how it like the basic components of what it comes up with, and then how it evaluates its own response at the end, which I think is really interesting. So it comes up with assumptions. It walks through the time plan, the game plan for spending time together. And the way I've written the instructions is it always needs to take an average words per minute, and tell you how long it would take to say that in a real interview. Okay.
Wow, that's so cool.
And this will come into play at the end when it kind of tallies up and summarizes its performance. Okay. So as an interviewer, usually if someone says that, I will say something like, yes, that sounds good, or whatever, keep going.
Yeah.
So then it takes time and it thinks about the product, why it matters, placeholder. So this question, by the way, we're working through is design a product to develop and build hobbies. You're a PM at Meta. How would you do that, right? Very classic kind of question. So it kind of goes through, I'm not going to get into the weeds too much, but this is basically something I'd say like, that makes sense. Okay. It comes up with a mission. Then it does comes up with ecosystem players. And as an interviewer, when I was doing that, I was like, interesting. How did you come up with those? I want to understand your thought process. This is actually something I would potentially say as an interviewer. And I tell people, ask those questions when you work with a Copilot. If it comes up with something that you're not sure why it does it, just ask. And then it actually unpacked its thought process. Like, who are all the people that have a stake in hobby development, right? And it came up with like different stages that can be involved in building hobbies. And based on those, it came up with ecosystem players. And again, timing itself as it's responding. So ultimately, I said, okay, like, sure, that makes sense. Focus on hobby enthusiasts. Okay, as an audience, that's not the segment; it's the ecosystem player. Okay, so within that, it follows my instructions for how you translate an ecosystem player into specific segments. So you've got motivations, how much time do they have, what's their current hobby engagement, and then it came up with 3 segments and scored them based on reach and
this is pretty good. Like, I love that even it like names each segment, like, and the names are pretty spot on.
Yeah, so it does all that. And it gives you its reason for which one it wants to focus on. So it wants to focus on the purposeful grower segment, which is the second segment. And it tells you why. It ties it to the mission and stuff. And then it brings it to life with a persona. Okay. And the persona is something that I tell people to do because it helps with problem identification. So it checks in with me. It took it 3.5 minutes to do all that theoretically, right? In real time, it takes like seconds. But it's telling me if I was a human speaking at average length, how long that takes. And then it came up with a journey to come up with problems. And then
I also love that every time it says like, great, let me take a couple of minutes. Like, I love that that's baked in too.
Exactly. So then it comes up with a user journey, and within that user journey, it came up with 3 problems. Now, and it scores each problem based on the frequency with which it comes up and the severity when it comes up. And it picks a problem and talks about why that's important and ties it back to even the mission that we stated earlier, which is something a very strong candidate would do. And as an interviewer at this point, I was like, actually, I'm looking at problem number 3, which is that Sarah like lacks a community of peers. Can you tell me like what's the actual pain point that you're trying to get at? And then it digs into it more, and it kind of goes like literally a layer or 2 deeper, and then it summarizes it as like a core pain point. And then I was like, does that make sense? Can I continue with problem 1 if you're following? And I'm like, yeah, like keep going. So then it gets into solutions. So it takes a couple minutes, thinks of solutions. It's supposed to be 3 completely different types of solutions. Then it picks one based on impact and effort. Okay. So here it picked the third solution. And I asked, hey, could you, and this is a question a real interviewer could ask, like, can you help me understand how all of these solutions actually solve that problem that you picked? Okay. So here it actually goes into like solution 1, solution 2, solution 3. It's realizing solution 2 might only partially solve the problem. So I was like, yeah, can you come up with another solution? Right. And this is where I'm trying to really stress test creativity. It picks another solution. It ultimately asks me, hey, like, you want me to reconsider? And I'm like, I want to know what you would do. Right. That's what an interviewer would say. So then it picks a third solution, gives me its
Which was
reason.
which was the original one that they like listed, I believe, right?
The social, yes,
Yeah.
social accountability challenges for hobby
Yeah.
building, right? And then it goes into what the V1 implementation of that solution might look like. And at the end and it goes through a couple of risks and how it might mitigate those risks. And then I said, because its solution basically assumed we would target this person with some kind of prompt that they should join this like watercolor challenge or whatever. I was like, how would the system know to prompt that person or like target that person with that prompt? And then it goes into, which is something I would ask a real candidate. And it came up with kind of like how we could use system signals and stuff to figure out who to target. And then asked why would it be Facebook versus an Instagram, and it kind of answered that. And I was like, cool. It went back and forth. Like, Facebook is better, Instagram is better, Facebook is better. And I was like, okay, what's your final decision? It's like, I think Facebook's better. Here's why. So then it was done. And then I was like, cool, can you now score your own performance? Right. So at this point, it playing the candidate is done. And now I'm asking it to shift gears into like reflection. Okay. So it kind of scores its own. It says it would have taken me like 26.5 minutes to like do all this content. It gives itself a score out from 1 to 5 on every one of the dimensions in this, this evaluation rubric. And then it gave itself an overall assessment with key strengths, key weaknesses, what worked well, what could be better. And that's kind of where this example ends. But you could very, very easily also be like, hey, like I would like you to apply like a slightly more critical lens of your performance. Like, what could you have done better? And it would probably ding its performance a little bit.
And what are you telling people to like do with that evaluation? Are you just like telling them, hey, like learn from the mistakes that the Copilot made so you can do better? And basically is that?
So the main way that I tell people to use this is there's probably 2 main ways, like the candidate mode, let's call it. The first way is when someone is working through. So, by the way, really good resource for people getting ready for these interviews is Lewis Lynn's question bank. It's a public question bank. A lot of questions from Meta, mostly Meta, but a lot of like DoorDash, Google kind of questions end up here too. So what I tell people is like, if you're getting ready for like a Meta PM interview, let's just say yesterday, there was a product sense onsite in which someone was asked, as a PM for the DMV, how would you improve the DMV experience? Okay. So if you want to practice that question, you go and, use my template. So you kind of start working through that question in my template. So you kind of like start with assumptions and fill out the motivation and all these different sections. Now, you could use my Copilot if you get stuck. So if basically, let's say you're like, how would I come up with a mission statement for this? What kind of assumptions even make sense for this question? So you can go in the Copilot and see how it does it. I always tell people, do human first. So like use your own brain first and only go to the Copilot if you get stuck or you're not sure how to proceed. Okay. That's one way to do it, is just to unblock yourself from continuing. The second way to use it is let's say you don't get stuck, you complete the whole template, but you just want to compare. You see like, what other way could this have gone? How else could I have approached this? So to kind of like compare your approach. The reason you and I might just like compare notes on anything in life, like it's like that reason, like how.
Yeah.
So to compare it. Yeah, that's the main way I recommend it. The version of this that I think is much better for kind of like improving your own performance over time is what I'd call the coaching mode version. So one of my students in my course, I loved her workflow, and she was successful in the interviews. So she filled out the templates, exported the PDFs, uploaded them into the coach mode and into the Copilot, and said, "Can you please score this response?" And then she did it with another question, and she did it with another question. And each time she was working through a new question, she was trying to incorporate the actionable feedback from the previous question she worked through to the next question. So, for example, let's say her segmentation was weak with question number one, and there was very specific things that she didn't do well. Then when she was working through question two, she incorporated that feedback into how she worked on question two. And then she uploaded the PDF for question two and repeated that for question 3, 4, 5. By the time
Wow.
she had her first onsite, she had done that with 6 questions. And her average score went from 2.2 to 3.6 over the course of those 6 iterations, which is failing to passing, right? So that's kind of like an example of how someone like is actually like using the Copilot to get better.
That's what's so cool about this type of products. Like, is that there's almost like no bounds to how you can use them, right? Like you maybe have like a recommended, like here's like what's how it's designed to be used. But given that the chat interface with attachments is so flexible, like it's really cool to see like all these like other ways that are very creative but also super useful and helpful.
Yeah, and actually another use case for this is someone I posted about this on LinkedIn, and I sent an email too, so it's out in the public. But I spoke with someone who bought my Copilot to prepare for Stripe's interviews and actually land the Stripe offer. And the way that they used my Copilot for the product sense in particular was Stripe expects you to have, three to present three products that you really like, and to be prepared to go deep on how you would improve that product for a specific segment. But you don't know in advance which one you're going to end up going deep on. So this person used my Copilot to basically explore all these like nooks and crannies of each of the 3 products that they were going to talk about. Actually helped them figure out which 3 products to talk about, because they were like, there's probably like half a dozen products I could talk about. So which ones are the best from an interviewer strategy perspective? And the way that they figured that out is by doing what this person called the Bandersnatch method of he's like, it's kind of like the episode of Netflix of Black Mirror on Netflix called the Bandersnatch, where it's like literally a choose your own adventure kind of Netflix episode. And so this person would literally create a branch. They would branch off at, let's say they got to the point in this exercise where they got to segmentation. Okay. So let's say they're like, hey, I want to know which of these segments I should pick. The segment I should pick is probably the one that would set me best up for the problems and the solutions. So what would the problem and solution branch of this whole tree
Mm,
look like if I pick segment 1? And what would the problem and solution branch of this whole exercise look like if I were to pick segment 2? So
genius.
you can actually create like a fork of the chat and just literally explore it, right? And then whichever one ends up resonating with you better, you're like, that's probably the one I would do.
Yeah, you
And
basically simulate every single branch and then you
exactly.
pick the one that you like.
Yeah, this and you and I know this because we've talked about it already, but that one person in particular who we're not going to talk about in detail on this episode is just impressive in general. Like the way that person approached a lot of their Stripe
Yeah,
interviews was very impressive. So that's the kind of rigor, people are like, what do you need to do to ace these interviews? It's like that kind of stuff, right?
that's what it takes. Yep. I know I've taken us into a lot of rabbit holes. I want to make sure we cover all of it. I know there's more of it.
Yeah. So I would say like this is like the broad strokes of, like the only other things I think we said is like, what do they actually get when they buy the Copilot? So when they buy the Copilot, they get a like this 1-pager PDF. Okay. And this 1-pager PDF includes instructions for how to set up the respective Copilots. And then it includes like kind of a refresher on some of my previous materials, letting me know if they get stuck. But I'd say all of the proprietary paywalled stuff is behind these 2 links. So like how to set up this one and how to set up this one. You can only access those if you're in the Google group. Okay. But within those, it basically looks like this. So there's So yes, people do need to buy the Copilot. They need to buy Claude rather, Claude Pro. I guess Projects is now in the free tier in Claude, but it has like real limitations, so you can't really
Yeah.
use the Copilot as well.
You get a
Um,
really nerfed version.
yeah, but it ends up there's literally 13,000 characters of instructions for the product
Wow.
sense one, which exceeds ChatGPT's instructions limit, which is only 8,000 characters. So I had to kind of do some hacky stuff to kind of allow people to use this with ChatGPT, but it's just not as good as the it's not as good as Claude at the instructions, at following instructions for that reason. And then there's like a Google Drive folder that gives them some files, so they can repeat this for the product sense one. They can repeat this for the analytical thinking one. Set up two different projects, or use the custom GPTs or ChatGPT. I have separate instructions for that, and that's how they end up using the Copilot. So when people buy the Copilot, this is ultimately like the thing they're buying. Is this a combination of instructions and files?
Makes sense. And it sounds like the cool part is once you buy it, you get updates
Totally.
as you kind of learn, or there's like something that you change. I'm curious, like, so I think like an interesting point that you made, right, is there like this gets better as you like your eyeballs get better, as your content gets better, but also there's like this third element that you said I don't control, but actually changes quite often, right? Which is the
Models.
foundational models and the version. So I'm curious, like, what is that process like, right? Like, it sounds like you probably have to be, especially for like OpenAI and Anthropic, which seems to be like the two major that you're working with. Like what is that process? Like, you have to be on top of it. Hey, like they just launched this thing, and like, what is your process for testing? Hey, is this still working? Like, do you have like almost like an eval that you do every time?
I just go through with, I pick a recent question from the question bank as if I just bought the Copilot for the first time, and I drop it into into a new chat, and I ask it to just work through this question. So one thing you might notice, so I just asked like, how do you build a product for volunteering? This divider
Oh
here in
wow,
this
yeah.
top section, it
So for
actually,
those listening, basically
yeah,
like for it asks it a question, and instead of giving you just one answer like the one that we walked through in the beginning, now we're seeing kind of like almost like two parallel answers. One that's like 1 minute long, and then the other one that's like half a minute,
so
basically.
they're not parallel in the sense that they're like A/B testing or something. It's more like there was the same content before in what we just walked through, Mark, but there was assumptions followed by a game plan, but there's only one timestamp for the collective response.
Oh,
And what you're seeing here is something that I actually do put in my instructions, which is generate an estimated minute, like time spent on every section of your response.
got it.
So 4.5 seems to actually take this first section, and it knows it's actually two sections, and therefore it actually created two timestamps. We can actually compare this to what we saw with the hobbyist example. You see this?
Yeah, it's the same exact same time, but one, yeah,
It's one
and pretty
block,
similar,
two
pretty
blocks.
similar answers too. I actually like the other one, the way they formatted the answer better, and because it's a little bit like easier to read. Um,
Yeah. That was like one of those vibe things. Like I was going through it. I'm
yeah,
like, okay, for my initial reaction is this feels better, but I don't know why. So like, let me deconstruct what's different.
yeah,
And I think my conclusion is just seems to follow the instructions better is kind of what, which is important for this use
yeah,
case. That's
totally.
actually arguably one of the most important things, and one of the reasons that ChatGPT, in my opinion, is not as good.
Have you had like the opposite happen of like a new model launches and like the Copilot just got like way worse?
I kind of felt that a little with Sonnet 4 versus
Mm,
3.7. I felt like Sonnet 4 took a little bit more liberty kind of interpreting the instructions, whereas 3.7 was more like, I will do exactly what you tell me. And it looks like they kind of decided to bring that back. Or maybe it's just an emergent property of what they did with 4.5 that it does seem to actually come really, really honors the instructions while almost like presenting itself as even more helpful. And yeah.
yeah,
Um, So
Yeah,
anyways, I
that's
know we're kind of like wrapping, but I think that this if our goals for the conversation were what is the Copilot? Why did you decide to build it? Why did you decide to build it the way you built it? How are people getting value out of it and using it? And what's like maybe that workflow for how I kind of evolved from distributing it from PayHip to like my current kind of like vibe coded stack with I didn't screen share the Google Sheets and Google Groups and Zapier because there's like some sensitive information there, but
yeah.
I hope the basic ideas kind of make sense now.
It makes sense to me. I think that the final question that I have is: was this like you basically revamped a lot of the functionality, that kind of like the end result, like the user experience maybe hasn't changed that much. You buy it and you get it. So I'm curious, like, one, how long did it take to like revamp the whole thing? Um, and was it worth it, right? Because like I think I'm looking at this, I'm like, yeah, like the page looks a lot better. But like how is it? I know, but I'm also like hearing, okay, like you went from like PayHip, like Google Groups, and an app script to now having Stripe, having more Zapier, having um, maybe another app script. So it sounds like you added quote unquote some complexity to the process, and also it probably took some time to build it. So yeah, what is the verdict so far of like how long did it take, and so far was it worth it, or is it still too early to tell?
I would say you gotta break it down. So like um, the first version of my vibe coded site for the Copilot, if you clicked buy now, it would still take you to PayHip.
Got it.
Okay. So that just the vibe coding of the website probably took like 5 hours maybe. Um, and I already had the domain. I ended up like hooking up Vercel. Um, I actually vibe coded my whole personal website and then I followed on by, so it was like incremental work on top of vibe coding my personal
Yeah.
website. Um, but that was, yeah, maybe 5 hours total to get all of it done. Like the website itself, not too much work. Um, I would say the moment I decided to hot swap PayHip for Stripe, needed to set up a product in Stripe with its own payment link. I needed to create another Zapier workflow because I didn't want to cannibalize the PayHip workflow because some people would still be going to PayHip. So I needed to keep the PayHip workflow alive while I also built a new Zapier workflow that uses the Stripe payment as the trigger. But basically, once one of those emails made its way into the sheet through Zapier, whether from PayHip or Stripe, the rest of the workflow was the same. Like all the
Got it.
automations with the Google App Script, all that stuff was unchanged. The Google Groups piece I had separately bit off how to set that up with Google Workspace, which was done when I was still using
Yeah.
PayHip as the primary piece. So yeah, there wasn't one phase of work. These have been kind of like incremental phases of work that
Yeah.
each kind of solve a different problem. But I don't pay PayHip anymore, so that's like another. It was like $30 a month before, plus like I think like maybe $10 per transaction or something that they were getting. So in a month where I'm selling like 20 Copilots or something, like I'd pay an extra 230 something bucks to PayHip that I don't have
Yeah.
to pay now. I obviously I pay a Stripe fee, but that's only like 2.9% of every sale. The Google Workspace account to get the automation going for the Google Groups is like $15 a month or something. So Vercel, I set that up for my personal site. I pay for analytics in Vercel as kind of like how they got me. So I pay like $15 a month for analytics through Vercel to know how people are clicking and stuff. But yeah, I'm probably like a few $100 up per month on the net. But as far as like I'm sorry, yeah, I'd say a few,
Yeah.
maybe 500, something like 500 to 1,000, depending on the volume. But no less than like $200 a month savings. But the biggest win has been the full creative freedom to do what I just showed you. If I'm like, hey, like there's an
Yeah.
example of how to use the Copilot that I think it would actually help people trust it more. I want to put that on the site and make it front and center. Like that's hard to do when you're stuck with one of the existing CMSs. So
Totally.
having my own version of that I can just like have infinite flexibility to do just made me more excited about it. And kind of like going all the way back to where we started this podcast episode, the key to doing these things to like making them sustainable and making them have a longevity is, I think, making sure that they not just make financial sense, but that they are energizing and fun. And so when I think about iterating on my Copilot site now, it's one of those things that feels fun.
Yeah. And I think the other benefit that I think it's hard to quantify or put like a price tag on it is like, I think we both love tinkering with this new technology, but I think it feels a little bit not dishonest, that's not the right term, but like it feels like disingenuous sometimes to try to like force yourself into like building a project just for the sake of using a tool. But I think when you have that alignment of like, hey, like there's this tool that I want to use and I think it can be valuable for this thing that I'm already working on or that's in my life. When that combination happens, there's a lot of fulfillment, and you're also able to pick up that new tool, which I think has compounding effects because then you can start using it for other things, right? Like all these learnings that you had for the Copilot were applying to insider loops and probably more things in the future, right? So I think that's you cannot really like remove that from the picture.
Totally. It's like stepping through a new door, right? Like every time you step through a new door, you have a new set of doors that are visible that you would not see before. And so for me, yes, I'm trying to stay on the cutting edge of what's possible because look, like I literally found out about Claude projects, and there is an income stream in my life that is a material income stream now that is also like it's a huge win-win for everyone. Like the people that buy it are getting a ton of value out of it. I get it. It allows me to keep doing what I do and put out a bunch of really great content and help people out. And none of that would have been possible had I not been on the lookout for things that are at the like new technologies and new products that are available to tinker with. And now that I know that, and we got into Cursor, like I know there's like I've thought about using MCP for my Copilot. I've thought about like what are the ways that this grows? Like should there be a platform that helps people do what I've done? Like should I help other Maven instructors build these kind of Copilots? And it's there's so many different ways that things could evolve, but for now, as you and I both know, focus is really important. So I think applying my learnings from this to insider loops with you and just kind of like doubling down on what we do together and doubling down on creating like scalable but very valuable content, and just putting like a fair price tag on it that feels like a win-win still for us and for the person that buys it. That's the kind of thing I'm just like that feels good, like doing that, whatever's at the intersection of those things.
Yeah, amen. I think I don't know. Like the last, like I think the reflection that I want to end this with is, like like we talked about like how this podcast, like part of the goal or like is to like learn something, inspire us to take action. Like I really hope like for people listening, they really like kind of get to process what Ben just did, right? If like I think there's a lot of talk about like build an AI app, right, that you can start monetizing, like, and you can do that, but there's like 1,000 other ways you can monetize on this like wave on your knowledge, right? Like and there's also like you don't have to like start super big and like build bytecode like a website, right? Like if you look at like how Ben started, literally like a Google Doc with instructions, a Google folder with files that were like like helpful content, and then like literally just sign up into an existing service called Payhip, and that's how we started, and it's been an incredibly like useful application of AI, and it's leveraging that tool. So and he didn't really need, like he could have built probably like a Copilot website that connects to the API, but he kept it simple.
Well, I did tinker with that for a while, if you remember, with Airframe for a few months this year, and yeah, like I just realized you can't build a product version of my Copilot without basically having to rebuild ChatGPT or without having to rebuild like the entire chat interface of Claude. So, we're all building on shoulders of giants. I mean, I think these guys are subsidizing their own products to the point where like they are losing money on your
Oh, for sure.
$20 a month plan on Claude. And if I were to build my own interface that leverages the APIs and leverages, the underlying models in its own wrapper, it would fundamentally, by definition, have to cost like a lot more than $20 a month. So yeah, I'd say like one of the things I hope people feel inspired to do is like don't reinvent the wheel. Like there's so many like Lego blocks that people are putting out there now. Finding the thing that none of them are uniquely positioned to deliver, and then focusing on just delivering that thing that you are uniquely positioned to deliver within the context of the existing, by leveraging all the existing Lego blocks, is I think it's why not every company rebuilds Stripe in their own product. Like there's already use Stripe, right? If you're gonna do payments, just use Stripe. That's not the thing
Yeah.
you should reinvent. So for me, that initially was don't reinvent the delivery mechanism of digital goods. But one of my learnings is, man, Google Apps Script is really good, and it's much simpler than I thought. And using ChatGPT to figure out what to put in Google Apps Script literally allows me to replace various automated email systems right now.
Yeah. And that's something that's just been around for a while. But now the access to ChatGPT and being smart enables like actually as mortals to use it and to get leverage from it. And yeah, and I don't want to like kind of like like play down what Ben has built. Like I also want to be like real talk, right? Like he has like a unique expertise that's very valuable, right? But and he's has like a gift on like teaching people, knowing like what information is valuable or not. He's also built a massive audience, which allows him to distribute this. So there's definitely a bunch of things that like are difficult that are true here, but I think anyone can get started somehow. And I think also the process of figuring out like that go to market distribution, that's like such a fun pursuit. And that I think if you don't have the distribution right now, just learning how to market, how to sell, I really think it's only going to help you in the future, and it's only going to become more and more valuable. So just go for it.
Thanks, man. It means a lot. I think it's been a lot of fun. And I'm excited to just keep. This is all just in the pursuit of getting the ultimate dopamine hit, is when people email me and tell me that they've landed a new job in a way that they couldn't if they didn't find my materials, that all the other stuff was like not good enough. And I'm not shitting on anyone in particular, but I can relate to that. Like this, everyone learns differently, and there's some group of people for whom my teaching style is the thing that resonates the most. It's like the one that makes sense. And when those people reach out to me, and they say that they're able to get a new like life-changing compensation package at like company like Meta, it just like it's addictive. So like everything I can do right now to get more of that just feels like, yeah, it's very, very motivating.
Yeah, I don't think with family, friends, like it's hard to get that dopamine hit. Like I haven't had like like find like a replacement to it. It's a very unique, like feel good moment. But anyways, I think we've accomplished the goal of this podcast. I think we covered all of it. I learned a ton. I knew I had like I knew you were doing this. I knew parts of it, but now I feel like I understand the full picture. So I really appreciate you walking me through this, man.
You got it. Thanks for making time, and I hope the audience finds it useful. And if anyone wants to check it out, feel free to go to I think we'll include the show links, but it's benerez.com/copilot. You could learn all about it.
Yeah, or Google it if you cannot find it on Google. That's also good feedback for Ben that we need to improve SEO.
Yeah, I don't know if I can do much better than the Lenny posts on the SEO front, but if you Google product sense interview or analytical thinking interview, you should be seeing my guest post as the first response, the first hand.
Amazing.
First link.